My name is Tim Griffin. Some of y'all, that's Timmy. I think I was Timmy when I was here with the high school program a long time ago. See, if you play your cards right, you can end up here 30, whatever it is, 30 years later. Now in the bowling alley. It was, I think we were at Miller's back then. But in any event, when I pulled up here, I guess I had driven by this since it switched over, but I hadn't been here. And I started wondering whether I was needing rehabilitation, what exactly this was going to entail. But it's good to be with you. I always look for an excuse to get down here, and I love it. I miss it. And my wife's from Camden, so we usually have an excuse to get down in this part of the state quite a bit. I was in Nashville, Arkansas this morning. I will be in Nashville, Tennessee tonight. I have Army drill this weekend. Thank you for your service. And we have a MUTA 6, so I'll be there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this weekend. So I'm going to drive over tonight to the other Nashville. But thank y'all for letting me be here. Good to see Bruce and all the politicians, Parnell, all the others. So when I was asked to speak, I figured that you probably wanted me to talk about our recent work on Common Core, but I think I'll just talk about that a little bit and talk about some other stuff and answer some questions from some people. When questions are asked, I'm going to appropriately apply the Rotary four-way test. Particularly, is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? That seems like a big loophole. I can eliminate a lot of questions with that one. So beware. Yes, I have a good intel unit. But I was telling some people, said, hey, there's some liberals here. I said, man, I went to Hendrix. I went to Hendrix, Oxford, and Tulane. I think I've seen some liberals. I actually seek them out because we don't have any left in Arkansas. Oh, thank goodness. So let's talk about Common Core for a second. So back in January or February, I guess it was, the governor asked me to chair this council, the Governor's Council on Common Core Review. And we all know that this has been a controversial issue to people on both sides. A lot of stuff circulating among parents and teachers on the internet, and the governor basically said during the last election cycle in 2014, he said, look, he may have said it a little differently, but he said, look, we're going to address this. We'll, I don't know the exact words. Maybe we'll have a task force or something. So the goal was to, I think, get to the bottom of a lot of the concerns. And you could say, well, that's been done elsewhere. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things done elsewhere in other states, but we have an obligation in our state to do for our citizens our own stuff. And I think that, we're not Massachusetts, thank goodness. And we needed to do our own thing here. And we needed to, in my view, we needed to do something that apparently was not done to Arkansans' satisfaction, and that is listen. Go around the state and listen. I have made the case that had the standards been rolled out in a way that where people felt like they had a voice and were participating, because process matters. If it would have been done differently, we would have, the standards probably be a little different than they were, but we'd also have people who didn't feel like they had something crammed down their throat. We live in a world, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's important here. We live in a world in transition from an industrial age, top-down, central controlled culture, this is the world, not just the United States, to a bottom-up ecosystem driven, grassroots driven, social media driven, communication driven culture. We're in that transition. There's a lot of actually research being done on this out in New Mexico. I think the guy's name is Stuart Kaufman, and it just talks about how, you know, it used to be one central control, whether it was in government or factory, could make all the decisions, and everybody just did whatever the central control, command and control model said. You work at a factory for a company for so many years, you get to watch. It was very top down. We used to get our news that way, right? You had 3 networks, you had newspapers, whatever you got from the top down, that was that. We live in a different world now. We live in a world where if your next door neighbor doesn't like something, they can tweet about it, Facebook about it, communicate directly to other people instead of waiting for it to come from the top down. Well, in that world, you ignore people at your peril. And because they have the ability to communicate person to person in a way that historically they did not. We talked about this some. We went around, we had, on the Common Core review, we had 40 hours of hearings in Little Rock with experts, pro and con, on Common Core and on testing and everything else. And we did 9 listening tour stops around the state. They were 2 hours each. And, you know, we had some people in education say, well, we were caught off guard. And I want to say, caught off guard? Where have you been? And so there was a lot of communication and listening that needed to occur that, in my view, did not occur when this stuff was handed down from the Republican and Democrat governors and the Gates Foundation to the states, who then did their thing and pushed it down to the school districts. People didn't feel like, and you can argue whether they did or not, but they didn't feel like that they had a role. They didn't feel like that they were asked their opinion, which is important in a democracy. It's pretty fundamental. So I said, yeah, I'll do this, and I'll chair this for you. And I'm sure the governor looked at me going, you're crazy. But I knew it was important, not just as a political, public official, academic matter, but as a personal matter for me. I have 2 young kids. They both go to public school. They both go to Little Rock Public Schools. You've heard of Little Rock Public Schools. They, you know, had some issues, to say the least, over the years. And so this was personal, is personal for me. I think I approached it with a pretty healthy perspective because I knew a little bit about what both sides said. I knew what the pro Common Core folks had been saying. I knew some of the stuff I had read about anti-Common Core. But more importantly, I think, I knew what I knew from helping my then second grader, I guess, with her homework. Because people didn't have to explain to me their frustration about the math or whatever. I understood because I was doing this homework, checking it, doing it with my daughter. And but I had not dug into the issue as intensely as was to be required, and as was required, in my view, by chairing the council. So I did that. And my goal was to have a very intense process. meaning we were going to have 8 hours of hearings per day when we did our hearings, which we did. We had probably 50 expert witnesses, so we did the tour of obviously around the state, listening to a lot of people, and so I wanted to be very aggressive in the schedule, and I wanted to get it done sooner rather than later. So it was going to be intense. I wanted it to be diverse. I wanted to hear people that I knew disagreed with each other. Because just like in a courtroom, that conflict of ideas helps you distill the answers, in my view. Helps me. That's the way I learn. I like to hear people arguing both sides in a civil way, applying your test there. And so I wanted it to be diverse, and we purposefully made sure that that people with disparate views were able to argue it out with a lot of passion at times. If you don't have passion over this, what do you have passion over? These are your kids. So we did that, and then in addition to intensity and diversity of thought and diversity of views on this, also I didn't want anybody at the end saying, well, you only heard from these people, or you only heard from those people. And you always risk the people saying, well, I can't believe you invited that person. That's exactly the type of people we want to invite. Right? I mean, you want when it's over, you want to say, we heard from everybody. Right? That wasn't done before. Some people on each side were thought of as fringe or whatever. If they could make a cogent argument, whatever the side was, I wanted to hear about it. And then thirdly was the transparency component. We had every single hearing live streamed on the web. It cost us $1,000 a day to do it. But we did it because I thought it was important. Because the big missing component for a lot of parents, whether it's you or not, for a lot of parents, one of the missing components is trust and confidence that you're being listened to. And so I knew that making sure that people around the state could hear what was going on, even if they didn't care to, if they knew they could, that's just as important. I learned in Congress that everybody wants you to have a town hall, but nobody wants to come. So I quit having them. I just gave everybody my cell phone. And they'd say, when you have a town hall, I go, you got my phone number? Just call me. And but in any event, the point was the process was important. And so we made sure that there was that transparency. And I really did approach it with an open mind, I believe. Here's what I learned. I learned that the people who were pro-Common Core, who said or basically acted as if the anti-Common Core were fringe, they were wrong. Because there were Dr. Sandra Stotsky, lots of who was head of the education department at the University of Arkansas. She's now out of state, PhD. Folks at Stanford and all over. There are folks who have problems with certain parts of Common Core who are highly respected. I also found out, and I had guts on some of this, but I found out that those who said everything in Common Core needs to go, it's the source of evil or whatever, that they were wrong too. In that both sides had really hurt their argument by overplaying their hand. And what I found was the following, and I think it's, I'm sure you probably didn't read every detail of our recommendations and findings, but in a nutshell, what I found was that the old standards were inferior. Everybody agreed on that. The old Arkansas standards were inferior, no doubt about I concluded that the way we got the standards, the current standards, the Common Core standards, the way we got them, the federal push, the carrot with the race to the top money, even though we applied and didn't get some of the money and all that. But I found that whole process played into a lot of the distrust, legitimate distrust, of Washington and this administration, and the people that advocated for Common Core should have known that the way they were doing it was actually hurting their ability to accomplish what they wanted to accomplish, because it was sort of a perfect storm of things that people didn't trust and people had questions about. And so the way that we got them, not enough public conversation in my view, federal push, Gates Foundation put a lot of top down. Okay? I think that process hurt. No, it did. Damaged greatly. It had a lot to do with why 5, 6 years later we had to revisit it. No question. Now, that's a separate issue. That's a separate issue of whether the substance of the standards are good or bad. Right? How we got them is a separate issue in terms of what the substance of the standards are and whether they're the best standards. That's a separate issue. But it wasn't separate in people's minds, because the way we got them tainted what we got. Found that out loud and clear. And understandably so. Understandably so. You may get a really good car from a particular car salesman that you don't trust. But maybe you don't want to take that chance. So you go to the other car salesman that you do trust. And it's not because the other car salesman never sells a good car. It's that you don't want to have to take a chance. Right? And because you've been burned so many times before, lemon law or not. Right? So that was loud and clear to me, that how we got them, not just in the state, but the whole narrative, from the people funding it and everything else. And what I told people when they would say, well, the federal government did this, they're bad, I would say, look, I agree that the process and some of the things used to coerce states to do that, I agree that was not exactly the best way to do it. And I said, by the way, the federal government uses that methodology in every part of your life, right? Highways, education, Medicaid, you name it, right? The federal government is in the business of coercing with cash. And so that's not new, right? So so where we ended up was, look, these standards aren't perfect. There are real identifiable issues with the standards. I sort of took a common sense approach. I said to people that were first of all, I said to the people that were pro, a lot of them in the bureaucracy, I said, well, hey, if you're so confident in these standards, why are you worried about people taking a close look at them? If you think they're great, then they're going to survive. Let the ideas, let the substance survive on its own, because it's so great. Everybody's going to see it's great. And I think they really hurt themselves, a lot of them, by acting as if they were perfect. They're just perfect. I don't know why you'd want to change it. And then they'd make these arguments about a changing world. The world's changing. We've got to be ready. And I said, yeah, the world's changing. Everything's changing. Wikipedia changes an encyclopedia entry every day instead of a static world book on the shelf. You know the one thing that you're saying we should not ever change, or at least for the next decade? Common Core. I said, this just doesn't make any sense. I understand the need, the desire to have comparability between states and all that. I got it. But we have a system called federalism, where we don't just have one country and that's it. We have a federal government, we have state governments, we have local governments, and it's hard to wrangle sometimes. But that's actually part of the genius of our system. And there is tension between having the same for everybody and being able to measure. I mean, if you really want to measure everything, and I'm not for this for the press here, if you really want to measure everything, just get rid of all the state lines, all the county lines, and just say, one government in Washington, which I'm against having that, for the record. Press gets it wrong sometimes, folks, but not these guys, particularly when you're recording it. Just play the whole thing, right? Excerpt it. But you get the point. Yes, there's tension between local control and central decisions. Yes. Yes. But that's the genius of our founders. They got that. And every time someone says, but, it means we got to have 50 different. Yes, that's the genius of every state being different. There are a lot of people who would rather not have every state be different. Just make everything federal in their minds. I don't agree with that. So that natural tension is there. I get it. I totally get it. But my common sense approach was, hey, let's look at the standards. If it was working, let's keep it. If it's not working, let's change it. What? Yes. Anything else in life? First of all, you got to get rid of the idea that it's static. It's dynamic. Everything's dynamic. To argue that you need static standards in a dynamic world is ridiculous. And you know what? If a bunch of teachers get together here in Arkansas and say, we wouldn't do things this way, well, let's change it. Let's change it. And look, and people go, oh, we can't compare states. If you pursue excellence, and really have excellence, you will be fine regardless. Harvard doesn't say before they graduate a class, we better give the same test that Stanford does to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. No, you don't need to do that. I totally get the comparability, and I think we'll be able to compare sufficiently using the ACT, which we've now moved to. Thank goodness. That was another one of our recommendations. And I will tell you that, so on the standards, fix what needs fixing, keep what needs to be kept, but don't let 10 people in the Department of Education decide that in Little Rock. Because let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to be right back here in 5 years. So when we passed off our recommendation, I made it clear to everybody who would listen, the governor and everybody else, that we did our part, and I think it went well, but now as we pass this off to the review process, to Johnny Key and everybody, and by the way, I think they get it. I think they've got a good path forward. I talked to Johnny. But I said, look, you cannot now, not that they wanted to, but you must maintain the transparency. Whatever you do in a review process, you need to make sure it's live streamed, etc. And I said, I will give $100,000, because we were in one of those meetings and somebody said, well, that's going to be real expensive. I said, how many do you think it'll cost? Well, we've got, I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give $100,000 of my budget from the Lieutenant Governor's office, assuming the legislature will allow that to happen. So I don't want to hear anybody say we had money for everything except transparency. So I took care of that, because it ain't going to cost $100,000, I assure you, to have the guy that we hired, who has a camera, who live streams it. It was $1,000 for 8 hours, an 8-hour day. So it ain't going to cost $100,000. So we took care of that. Hopefully, they understand. I think Johnny totally gets the participatory part. They're asking for I think 75 on the math and 75 folks on the science. All Arkansans to look at this and study this. And you know what? You may find that the people in the classrooms who have practice with it can make some improvements on it. Hey, imagine that. So I think we're going to end up in the end with better, more accepted standards that are all about excellence, and some things we'll keep. Now, I say to people that don't like Common Core, I say, well, look, you're not against the multiplication tables that are in Common Core, right? Oh, okay. Well, that's something that we can agree on we need to keep. Although they go up to factors of 10, I think, and I think we want to go to 12 or 15, for example. So there's a change, right? Common sense. So I think we're on a good path there. I think the governor's laid out a good path. We're in the review process now. I'm done with my formal role, and I know the clock's ticking. On the park test, I will tell you there was more agreement on getting rid of park than anything else we found. I mean, folks that love some Common Core were ready to kill park. Just go. The head of test over at Central High. Get rid of park. Get rid of park. And then I heard, when we recommended that, some folks on the board said, oh, well, who did they talk to? They didn't talk to teachers. And I said, well, that's funny, because I was at your Little Rock public school picking up my daughter about 2 hours ago, and I told the paper this, and I said, 5 or 6 teachers, public school teachers, cornered me and said, you're getting rid of park, aren't you? So, everybody's got the 2 teachers they want to talk to get their answer that they want, but I can just tell you, it was overwhelming. Not unanimous, nothing in life is. When I try to pick a restaurant in our car, I can't get unanimity with 4 people. So I get it's not unanimous, but that's not the standard. Yeah, I think it was overwhelming to move from park, and a lot of it had to do with the accepted brand of ACT. People know ACT, they trust ACT. I took ACT ages ago, and it was interesting. You'd hear people say about park, you say, well, we didn't have a role in writing ACT. Well, we didn't have a role writing the ACT that you take to go to college either. Has that stopped us from using it? Did you have a role writing SAT and didn't stop it? So that was sort of an argument that was propped up and knocked down pretty quickly. But I think we're on the right path with that. But here's the thing, and this is really what we all need to remember. You could have a teacher, a really good teacher, and kids that are hardworking, and I'm not advocating for this. I'm posing a hypothetical. The standards are important, but you could have teachers with the old standards that are not as good as what we have, and if it was the right teacher, you'd have excellence. You can have others, with the new standards and have a different situation. There are so many other factors, is the point. Parental involvement, resources. Although we've seen in Little Rock that you can pour money. The money that they've blown in the Little Rock School District over the years. And what's that done to results? I don't even have to answer that because everybody in the room knows. You know what that shows you? It's not all about the money. You need enough money. You need enough money to have what you need. But at some point, you have to make systemic, bold changes. And real quickly, I know we're running out of time. I'm taking one more minute here. So what am I going to do next on education? Well, I'm certainly going to help any way I can on this Common Core review, but to be clear, I'm done with my formal role there. If someone calls, I'll give advice, I'll speak up, and I think they're on the right track. What I'm really interested in is the public school choice. What makes me mad is I see some schools that look like they're going out of their way to make sure they have grounds to deny kids transfers. And I just ask you to think about this. Is it about the kids or is it about the buildings? Is it about the kids or is it about the superintendent? Is it about the kids or is it about the bureaucracy? What's it about? If it's about the kids and they're going to be better off going to another school, then what's the argument? There is no argument. And we've been denied. In Little Rock, a bunch of kids got denied transferring to another school. And one of the state school board members that I went to Hendricks with, at least he was honest. I think it was embarrassing, but at least he was honest. He said, well, you know, I understand the kid and all, but I'm worried about the impact on the district. That wasn't me, that was him. That's incredible. It's incredible. So that's my next fight. I'm going to go around the state and talk about the formula for better education. And I'll come back if you'll let me and talk how we compete against other states. This is part of it. But my formula is this. I really believe it. Competition forces people to innovate. Innovation results in excellence. That's it. That's it. If there's a monopoly on schools, it's not exempt from the rules of monopolies, folks. They have no incentive to get better unless they're just good people. And sometimes that happens. But I can't rely on that. I need competition. I need people saying, hey, we better get our act together or we're going to have a school with no students. You know what they'll do? Probably have to get the act together. Unions won't like it. That's okay. They never liked me anyway. So anyway, I think we have great opportunities, but we must dream big and act boldly, and I'm going to continue to push for that. I'm sorry, thank you all so much for having me.